I moved as far inland as I could, to a place where the earth is dry and cracked, where nothing grows unless you force it to with irrigation lines and sheer will. I can't stand humidity. I can't stand the smell of wet drywall or the sound of pipes settling in the night, but mostly, I can't stand neighbors. I live on 40 acres of scrubland now. If I see another human being, they are a mile away, a silhouette against the sun. That is the only way I can sleep. It started 3 years ago. I was living in a subdivision called Harrow's Creek, one of those places carved out of a damp woodland in the Pacific Northwest. It was nice enough. The houses were distinct, Victorians, colonials, craftsmen, all situated on half-acre lots that gave you the illusion of privacy. I lived at 40 Blackwood Lane. The house next to me, number 42, had been empty for the better part of a decade. It was a looming Victorian monstrosity painted a peeling shade of slate gray, its windows like cataracts, clouded with years of grime. Then, the sold sign appeared. No tours, no open houses, just a sign one day and a moving truck the next. I was sitting on my porch, drinking coffee and trying to ignore the looming deadline of an architectural draft I was working on when the truck arrived. It wasn't a professional moving van. It was a rusted, unmarked box truck that shuddered and wheezed as it backed into the driveway of number 42. The driver didn't get out. Instead, the passenger door opened, and a man stepped onto the cracked pavement. That was my first look at Silas Vane. He was tall, impossibly thin, wearing a suit that looked like it had been tailored for a man with twice his bulk in the 1920s. He wore a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow, but I could see his chin, sharp, pointed, and gray. He didn't look at the house. He looked at the trees surrounding it. He stood there for a long time, just breathing. Then, without acknowledging me or the driver, he walked to the front door, unlocked it with a key that looked too large for the lock, and vanished inside. The driver began unloading. There was no furniture, no bed frames, no sofas, no tables, just boxes, hundreds of them. They were heavy, soggy cardboard boxes that sagged at the bottom. The driver wore thick rubber gloves. I watched as he hauled them in one by one. At one point, a box slipped from his grip and hit the driveway. It didn't crash or shatter. It made a wet, heavy thud, like a side of beef hitting a butcher's block. A dark fluid seeped from the corner of the cardboard. The driver swore, scooped it up, and hurried inside. I should have walked over. I should have done the neighborly thing, brought a casserole, introduced myself, but a primal alarm bell was ringing in my lizard brain. Predator, it whispered. Sickness. Rot. The first month was defined by the noise. You expect noise when a neighbor moves in. Hammers, drills, music. But Vane didn't seem to be building anything. The sounds coming from number 42 were wet. At night, when the streetlights hummed and the rest of the neighborhood slept, I could hear it through my bedroom wall, which faced his house. It sounded like someone stirring a giant vat of thick soup, a rhythmic, squelching churning. Occasionally, there was a sound like canvas tearing, high and sharp. I met him properly 3 weeks in. I was taking my trash bins to the curb. It was dusk, the sky a bruised purple. I turned around, and he was standing right behind me. I yelped, dropping the lid of the bin. "Apologies," he said. His voice was like dry leaves skittering on pavement, raspy, multitonal. "I didn't hear you walk up," I stammered, heart hammering. "I walk softly," Vane said. He was closer now. The smell coming off him was overpowering. It wasn't body odor. It was the smell of a florist's shop that had lost power for a week. Sickly sweet decomposition, ammonia, and wet earth. Up close, his skin was terrifying. It looked translucent, like wax paper stretched over bone. I could see dark veins pulsing beneath his cheeks, but they didn't look like blood vessels. They looked like roots. "Here, I am Silas," he said. He didn't offer a hand. "Arthur, I live right there." I pointed to my house, feeling stupid. "I know," he said. He tilted his head. His eyes were completely black. No iris, no sclera, just polished obsidian orbs. I told myself it was a trick of the low light. "Your house, it breathes well." "It's, good insulation," I said. "Insulation," Vane repeated, tasting the word. "Yes, the membrane must be kept intact until it is time to shed." He smiled then. His teeth were yellow and too numerous. I stepped back. "Good to meet you, Silas. I have to go inside. Dinner on the stove." "Eat well, Arthur," he whispered. "Growth requires fuel." I ran inside and locked the door. I locked the deadbolt. I checked the windows. That night, the churning sound was louder, and for the first time, I heard something else. I heard scratching, not from his house, but from inside my own walls. By the second month, the vegetation changed. Harrow's Creek was known for its pine trees and rhododendrons, but the yard of number 42 was spawning something else. Great weeping vines with thorns the size of fingers exploded from the soil. They climbed the siding of Vane's house, sealing the window shut. They were a pale, fleshy pink color. They didn't look like plants. They looked like intestines. They grew fast, visibly fast. I would wake up in the morning and find them had advanced another foot, reaching across the fence line towards my property. I called the homeowners association. A woman named Brenda came out. She was a stickler for rules, the kind of woman who measured grass height with a ruler. I watched from my window as she marched up to Vane's door, clipboard in hand. She knocked. The door opened a crack. I saw a pale hand emerge. Brenda stiffened. She seemed to be arguing. Then the hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. I gasped, hand on my phone to dial 911, but just as quickly, he let go. Brenda stumbled back, looking dazed. She dropped her clipboard. She turned and walked to her car, her movements stiff and jerky. She drove away without picking up the clipboard. When I called her later, she sounded hollow. "It is natural," she said. "It is the new way. Goodbye, Arthur." I started buying bleach, gallons of it. I poured it along the fence line. Where the chemical hit the pink vines, they hissed and retracted, bleeding a thick black ichor. The turning point came in November. The rains had started and never stopped. The world was gray and soaking. I was in my basement, checking the sump pump, when I noticed the patch on the wall. My basement wall, the one shared with the direction of Vane's house, was concrete block. But in the center, about 4 feet up, the concrete was soft. It was spongy. A yellow mold, vibrant and pulsating, was spreading in a perfect circle. I put a mask on and scraped it off with a putty knife. Under the mold, the concrete was crumbling. I poked it with a screwdriver and the metal sank in 2 inches deep. The concrete wasn't concrete anymore. It had been transmuted. It felt like cartilage. I backed away, gagging. I ran upstairs and called the police. I told them I heard screaming from next door. It was a lie, but I needed them to enter that house. 2 officers arrived an hour later. I met them in the driveway. "He's got something in there," I told them. Rain plastering my hair to the skull. The smell, the fluids, something is rotting. Officer Miller, a burly man who looked like he'd seen it all, nodded. "We'll do a welfare check." They knocked on the door of number 42. No answer. The house loomed dark and silent, covered in the probing pink vines. Miller tried the knob. Locked. He pounded on the wood. "Mr. Vane, police department." Nothing. Miller looked at his partner, then put his shoulder to the door. It didn't budge. It sounded like he was hitting a side of leather. He tried again, harder. The door didn't break open. It squelched open. The frame seemed to stretch and tear as the door swung inward, trailing strings of sticky mucus. The officers drew their guns and went in. I stood in the driveway, waiting. The silence stretched. 1 minute. 2. Then a sound. It wasn't a gunshot. It was a wet, sucking sound, followed by a muffled cry of surprise. Then silence again. "Officer?" I called out. Officer Miller walked out. He wasn't wearing his hat. His eyes were wide, pupils dilated to the rim. He holstered his gun. "Everything is fine," Miller said. His voice was flat. "Where is your partner?" "Checking the rear," Miller said. He walked past me, toward his cruiser. He walked with a strange, loping gait, his knees bending slightly backward. "What did you see?" I demanded, grabbing his arm. His skin was freezing, hard and cold. He looked at me, and for a second I saw something moving behind his pupil, like a worm swimming in the vitreous fluid. "Renovations," Miller said. "He is just renovating. Go inside, Arthur. It's not safe out here. The spores are heavy tonight." He got in the car and drove away. He left his partner inside. That was when I knew I was alone. I went inside and boarded up my windows. I took the architectural plans I was working on and burned them in the fireplace just to have light and heat, because the power had started to flicker. The house was cold, but the walls were warm. I put my hand against the living room plaster. It was fever hot. I could feel a pulse. My house was being infected. The organism next door wasn't just growing on the land, it was changing the molecular structure of everything around it. It was digesting the neighborhood. I grabbed my keys, my laptop, and a crowbar. I was leaving. Now. I opened the front door, and I froze. The pink vines had crossed the driveway. They had woven together into a thick, fleshy barricade, sealing off the exit. My car was consumed, a lump of metal under a layer of pulsating membrane. I turned to the backyard. The fence was gone, replaced by a wall of writhing thorns. I was trapped. The only way out was through the source. I don't know where the logic came from. Hysteria, perhaps. If I could kill the heart, maybe the limbs would die. I ran to the basement. The cartilage patch on the wall had grown. It was now a gaping orifice, oozing yellow bile. I took the crowbar and swung it. I didn't chip rock. I tore flesh. The wall screamed, a high-pitched tea kettle shriek that vibrated in my teeth. I swung again and again, hacking through the soft, meat-like barrier that used to be a foundation. I broke through into Silas Vane's basement. The air that hit me was hot, humid, and smelled of copper and old lilies. I crawled through the hole, gagging. Silas Vane's basement was not a basement. It was a stomach. The floor was covered in a foot of digestive acid. Islands of bone, femurs, ribs, skulls poked out of the slurry. The walls were lined with egg sacs, thousands of them, translucent and glowing with a soft bioluminescent green light. Inside each sac, a curled form twitched. They looked like fetuses, but their limbs were too long, their fingers tipped with chitinous claws. And in the center, suspended by thick arteries that ran into the ceiling, was Officer Miller. He was still alive. His skin had fused with the organic matter of the room. Vines entered his mouth and ears, pumping fluids into him. His eyes met mine. They were filled with absolute, shattering terror. He tried to speak, but only bubbles of green slime escaped his lips. Then I heard the clicking. I looked up. Silas Vane was clinging to the ceiling, but it wasn't the Silas I knew. The suit was gone. His skin had split open like a husk. What emerged was a monstrosity of geometry and biology. He was a centipede human hybrid, his torso elongated into a segmented carapace, dozens of human arms serving as legs, each hand tipped with a surgical scalpel of bone. His face was still there, stretched over a mandible that dripped enzymes. "Arthur," the thing hissed. The voice came from everywhere. "You are early. The gestation is not complete." "What are you?" I screamed, gripping the crowbar. "A builder," Vane chittered. He skittered down the wall, defying gravity, his many hands clutching the fleshy folds of the room. "Your house was dead, Arthur. Wood and stone, dead matter. I am giving it a soul." He lunged. I swung the crowbar blindly. It connected with one of his human arm legs, shattering the bone. Vane shrieked, a sound that popped one of my eardrums. He recoiled, his mandibles snapping inches from my face. I scrambled backward, slipping in the digestive slime. My hand landed on something hard. A gas can, one of the items the movers had brought in. It was old red metal. "You resist the Union," Vane hissed, gathering himself for another strike. "Look at the piece." He gestured to the police officer, whose eyes were rolling back as he was absorbed further into the hive. "Burn," I wheezed. I uncapped the gas can. It was full. I didn't hesitate. I splashed the contents all over the egg sacs, over the police officer, over the rushing form of Vane. Vane froze. The smell of gasoline cut through the rot. For the first time, the obsidian eyes showed fear. "No," he clicked. "The architecture is delicate." I fished my lighter from my pocket. "Renovate this," I said.
I flicked the wheel. The spark caught the fumes instantly. The blast threw me backward through the hole in the basement, back into my own basement. The scream that came from number 42 was not of this world. It was the sound of a tectonic plate shifting, of 1,000 voices crying out in unison. I crawled up my basement stairs as the heat rose. My house was reacting. The walls convulsed, the floorboards buckled. The organism was dying, and as it died, it thrashed. I made it to the kitchen just as the windows blew out. I threw myself through the shattered back door, cutting my arms on the glass, tumbling into the backyard. The fleshy vines that had blocked the exit were withering, screaming as they curled into ash. I scrambled over the smoking remains of the fence, running until my lungs burned, running until I hit the street. I turned back. Number 42 was a torch, but the fire wasn't orange. It was a kaleidoscope of burning chemicals, greens, purples, and blues. The structure of the house was melting, not collapsing. The roof sagged like wet clay, and inside the flames I saw a silhouette, tall, many-armed, thrashing against the dying membrane of its hive. The fire department came. They treated me for smoke inhalation and shock. They said it was a gas leak. They said the old man who lived there must have been a hoarder, that the chemicals accelerated the blaze. They didn't find any bodies. Not Vane, not the officer. They said the heat was so intense it vaporized everything. I moved away the next day. I left everything I owned. But sometimes, late at night, in my cabin in the desert, I wake up scratching. I look at my skin in the mirror, and just below the surface of my left arm, right where I cut it on the glass while escaping, there is a faint, pink line. It's not a scar, it's a vine. It moves when I sleep. It whispers to me. It tells me that the renovations aren't finished. It tells me that I am the new foundation. I pick up the knife. I have to get it out. I have to get it out before I start to build.
The separation between my life and his was exactly 4.5 inches. That is the standard thickness of a residential wall. 2 layers of drywall, a few wooden studs, and a pocket of stale air. We like to think of walls as barriers, as shields that grant us privacy, but in the grand scheme of things, they are nothing more than acoustic membranes. If you listen hard enough, you can hear a life unfolding on the other side. And if they listen hard enough, they can hear you breathing. I moved into the Kensington Arms in late October. It was one of those pre-war buildings that had been renovated firmly into the good enough category. The lobby had marble floors that were permanently sticky, and the elevator groaned like a dying animal every time it passed the 3rd floor. I took Unit 4A. It was a corner unit, decent light, hardwood floors that had been refinished so many times they were paper thin. It was a steal for the city, and I was desperate. My breakup with Sarah had left me with half a savings account and a need to be anywhere but our old shared cottage. The landlord, a man named Mr. Henderson, who seemed to be composed entirely of cigarette ash and sweat, handed me the keys with a grunt. "Quiet building," he wheezed. "Mostly older folks. Don't make trouble, you won't get trouble. Rent is due on the 1st. Cash or check. No Venmo nonsense." "Who's in 4B?" I asked, glancing at the peeling black door adjacent to mine. The proximity bothered me instantly. The door frames were barely 6 inches apart. Henderson shrugged. "Mr. Calloway. Quiet guy. Been here since the 70s. You won't hear a peep out of him." That was the first lie. The first week was uneventful. It was the honeymoon phase of independent living. I arranged my furniture, bought a few plants I'd inevitably kill, and tried to establish a routine. I work remotely as a data analyst, so the apartment was my world. 4A was my fortress. But the silence of the building was oppressive. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was a heavy, pressurized silence, the kind you feel in your ears when you dive too deep underwater. I met Calloway on the 4th day. I was struggling with 2 bags of groceries and a case of sparkling water, trying to shimmy my key into the lock. His door opened. It didn't swing open. It cracked. Just an inch, the chain lock still engaged. Through the sliver of darkness, I saw an eye. It was milky, surrounded by skin that looked like crumpled parchment paper. "Hello?" I said, shifting the weight of the water. "I'm Mark, just moved in next door." The eye didn't blink. A smell drifted out from the crack. It hit me before I could process it. Sweet, cloying, like rotting fruit mixed with bleach. "You walk heavy, Mark," the voice rasped. It sounded wet. "You walk heavy on the heels." Thump, thump, thump. "Oh, sorry. I'll take my boots off inside." Thump, thump, the voice repeated, devoid of inflection. The door clicked shut. I heard 3 distinct locks engage. Slide, click, thud. I stood there in the hallway, the smell of bleach lingering in my nostrils. I told myself he was just a cranky old man. Every building has one. I was the interloper, the young guy disrupting the ecosystem. I resolved to be quieter. The real terror began 2 weeks later. It started with the scratching. I was in bed, staring at the ceiling, drifting in that hypnagogic state between wakefulness and sleep. My bed was positioned against the wall I shared with 4B. The scratching started low, near the floorboards. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was rhythmic, slow, deliberate. It didn't sound like a mouse. A mouse scurries. This sounded like a fingernail being dragged down the drywall with enough pressure to leave a mark. It would start at the top of the wall, near the ceiling, and slowly descend to the floor over the course of 10 seconds. Then silence. Then it would start at the top again. I sat up, switching on the bedside lamp. The room was bathed in warm yellow light, but the wall looked ominous. I pressed my ear against the cold plaster. Silence. Then, directly on the other side of where my ear was pressed, tap. One single hard tap. I recoiled, heart hammering. It was a response. He knew I was listening. I grabbed a broom handle, a classic cartoonish reaction, and banged on the wall. "Knock it off!" I shouted. The response was immediate. A low, guttural laugh. It wasn't loud, but the walls were so thin it sounded like he was under my bed. Heh, heh, heh. I slept on the couch that night. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in my apartment shifted. It felt violated. I started noticing small things out of place. I'm a creature of habit. I leave my keys in a bowl by the door, my toothbrush in the left hole of the holder, my laptop closed on the coffee table. One Tuesday, I came home from a rare office visit to find my laptop open. Not on, just open. The screen was black, the battery dead. I assumed I'd forgotten to close it, but then I went to the bathroom. My toothbrush was wet, sopping wet. I hadn't been home since 7 a.m. A cold dread washed over me. I checked the windows, locked. The front door, deadbolted. There was no sign of forced entry. I called the landlord. "Henderson?" I demanded. "Been in my apartment?" "I ain't got time for that," he grunted over the phone. "Unless there's a leak, I don't go in." "Someone was in here." "You changed the locks?" "No." "Well, maybe you gave a key to a girlfriend." "Look, kid, unless something is broken, don't bother me." I bought a hidden camera that night, a small cube disguised as a USB charger. I plugged it in, facing the front door and the hallway leading to the bathroom. I felt paranoid, borderline crazy. I was the heavy walker next door, losing his mind. The footage from the first night revealed nothing. No one entered, no one left. But the audio picked up something I hadn't heard with my own ears. I watched the playback at 2x speed, looking for movement. Nothing. But when I listened to the audio track at 3:17 a.m. while I was asleep in the next room, I heard it. From the wall shared with 4B, a voice was speaking. It wasn't whispering to itself. It was projecting. Mark is sleeping. Mark is dreaming. Mark misses Sarah. Mark is lonely. Then a pause, and then, in a voice that chilled my blood, because it was a perfect mimicry of my own voice, "I promise I'll do better, Sarah. Please don't go." It was a line I had said to my ex-girlfriend 6 months ago, in a house 20 miles away. How did he know that? How could he possibly know that? I stopped sleeping. I started drinking coffee by the pot. I sat in my living room staring at the shared wall, waiting. I researched Callaway. There was nothing. No social media, no phone records online, just a name in a directory from 1982. The escalation hit its peak on a rainy Tuesday. I was working, headphones on, trying to drown out the anxiety. I went to the bathroom to splash water on my face. As I looked in the mirror, I noticed something odd about the medicine cabinet. It was an old metal recessed unit, painted over a dozen times. The paint along the right edge, the edge closest to 4B, was cracked, freshly cracked. I touched it, and the cabinet shifted. It wasn't screwed in tight. The screws on the right side had been removed, leaving only the ones on the left acting as a hinge. Pulse pounding in my ears, I grabbed a screwdriver from the kitchen. I removed the remaining screws. I pulled the cabinet out of the wall. Behind it, there should have been a stud bay, insulation, maybe the back of the drywall for the next unit. Instead, there was a hole, a meticulously cut rectangular hole through the lath and plaster leading directly into the wall cavity. And beyond that, light, dim, flickering blue light. I grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the void. The wall between our apartments had been hollowed out. The studs had been sawed away to create a crawl space, a tunnel running the length of the bathroom. I leaned in, squinting. The smell hit me again, rotting fruit and bleach, overpowered by the copper tang of old blood. I shone the light to the right. Nothing. I shone it to the left, toward his bathroom. Through a matching hole in the back of his medicine cabinet, I could see into his bathroom. But it wasn't a bathroom. It was a dark room. Photos were hanging from lines strung across the tub, hundreds of them. I zoomed the beam of my flashlight. My breath hitched. The photos were of me sleeping, me eating cereal, me watching TV, me in the shower. But they weren't taken from outside. The angles were impossible. They were taken from inside my apartment. Then there was the shrine. On the toilet tank in his bathroom sat a mannequin head. It was wearing a wig that matched my hair color. It had photos of my eyes taped over its eyes, and around its neck was my missing blue tie. Suddenly, the light in his bathroom went out. Total darkness through the hole. Then a sound, the slide of the shower curtain. "I see you, Mark," the voice whispered. It wasn't coming from the hole. It was coming from right behind me. I spun around. The bathroom door, which I had left open, was now closed. I hadn't heard it close. I lunged for the knob. Locked from the outside. Panic, raw and primal, took over. I slammed my shoulder against the door. It held. The wood was old, but the lock was new. Wait, when had the lock been changed? "Open the door!" I screamed. "No," the voice said from the hallway of my own apartment. "We are roommates now." I heard the heavy footsteps. Thump, thump, thump. My own boots. He was wearing my boots. I backed up against the sink, grabbing the heavy ceramic lid of the toilet tank. I watched the doorknob jiggle. Then silence. I looked back at the hole in the wall where the medicine cabinet used to be. A hand, pale, skeletal, with long yellow nails, reached through from his side. It was holding a camera. Click. The flash blinded me. "Smile," the voice rasped from the hallway. I didn't wait. I kicked the door with everything I had. Once, twice. On the third kick, the frame splintered. I tumbled into the hallway. The apartment was empty. The front door was open wide. I ran. I didn't stop until I was 3 blocks away in a bodega, shaking so hard I couldn't dial 911. When the police arrived, they swept Unit 4B. It was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no clothes, just dust and a single chair facing the wall shared with my bedroom. But the bathroom confirmed everything. The cutout behind the cabinet, the tunnel, and the photos. They found thousands of Polaroids, but they weren't just of me. They were of the previous tenant and the one before that. They never found Calloway. The landlord, Henderson, claimed he didn't have a record of a Calloway ever living there, despite what he told me. He claimed the unit had been vacant for repairs for years. He said I must have been hallucinating from a gas leak. But I know the truth, because when I went back to pack my things, accompanied by a police officer,
I found one last Polaroid tucked under my pillow. It was a photo of me taken from the ceiling angle, looking down at my sleeping form. The timestamp on the photo was from that morning, and written in Sharpie across my chest were the words, "See you in the next one."
I've always been a light sleeper. A dripping faucet or a distant car alarm is usually enough to pull me out of a deep REM cycle. So when I moved into the duplex at 402 Ridley Avenue, I made sure to ask the landlord about the noise insulation. He assured me the walls were brick-lined, solid and soundproof. He lied. Or maybe he just didn't know what the previous tenant had done to the place. The first week was blissful. I was 24, fresh out of college, and starting a junior graphic design job in the city. The rent was cheap, surprisingly so for the square footage. My neighbor was an elderly man named Mr. Calloway. I met him on move-in day. He was standing on his porch, staring at a dead potted plant with an intensity that was unsettling. He didn't wave when I pulled up. He just turned his head slowly, his neck craning like a tortoise, and watched me haul boxes. When I said hello, he muttered something about keeping the noise down and retreated inside, slamming his heavy oak door. That should have been the first red flag, but I chalked it up to him being a grump. I unpacked, set up my workspace in the living room, and put my bed against the shared wall, the long wall that ran the length of the house, separating my sanctuary from Mr. Calloway's domain. It started on the third night. I was lying in bed, scrolling through my phone, the blue light illuminating the ceiling. It was around 2 a.m. The house was dead silent. Then, right behind my head, I heard it. Scritch, scritch, scritch. It was rhythmic, soft, like a fingernail being dragged slowly across the plaster on the other side. I froze, holding my breath. I waited. Scritch, scritch. I sat up, turning on the lamp. The sound stopped instantly. Mice, I whispered to myself, trying to regulate my heartbeat. It's just mice in the wall cavity. But mice don't stop when you turn on a light. Mice scurry. This sound had paused, as if reacting to my movement. I knocked on the wall with my knuckle. 3 sharp raps. From the other side, barely audible, came 3 sharp raps back. A cold bucket of ice water seemed to pour down my spine. I stared at the blank white paint. "Hello?" I asked, feeling foolish. Silence. I convinced myself I had imagined the response. It was late, I was tired. Echoes were weird in old houses. I put in earplugs and went to sleep, though my dreams were filled with the sound of dry skin rubbing against drywall. Things escalated a week later. I came home from work to find my apartment smelling off. It wasn't a bad smell exactly. It smelled like Old Spice and stale tobacco. I didn't smoke and I didn't wear cologne. I checked the windows, all locked. I checked the back door, deadbolted. Paranoia, I told myself. Just the vents sharing air. But that night, the scratching returned, and this time it was accompanied by a low, melodic humming. It was coming from exactly the same spot as before, directly behind my bedhead. It sounded like a lullaby, distorted by the drywall. I pulled my bed away from the wall, dragging the frame across the hardwood floor. I knelt down, inspecting the plaster. That's when I saw it. A tiny hole, no bigger than the tip of a pencil lead. It was so small you'd miss it if you weren't looking for it. But beneath the hole, on the baseboard, was a fine dusting of white powder. Someone had drilled through from the other side. My stomach churned. I grabbed a piece of tape and covered the hole. Then I pushed the bed back, but I slept on the couch that night. The next morning, I confronted Mr. Calloway. I pounded on his door. It took him 5 minutes to answer. When he did, he opened it a crack, the chain still on. The smell of stale tobacco wafted out, thick and choking. "What?" he rasped. His eyes were watery, pale blue and red-shot. "Mr. Calloway, I think you might be accidentally drilling into my wall," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "There's a hole in my bedroom." He stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then the corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Fixing a shelf," he grunted. He shut the door in my face. "Fixing a shelf," I repeated. It seemed plausible. Old men were always tinkering. Maybe he was just clumsy. I went back to my apartment feeling slightly better, but still uneasy. I decided to inspect the rest of the shared wall. I moved the dresser in the living room. Nothing.
I checked the bathroom. Nothing. Then I went into the walk-in closet in the hallway. It shared a wall with his unit as well. I pushed aside my winter coats and shone my flashlight on the back wall. My heart stopped. There wasn't just one hole. There were dozens. They were clustered in a pattern at eye level, and some of them had been widened. I leaned in closer, terrified of what I might see, but compelled by a primal need to know. I put my eye to the largest hole, about the size of a dime. Light. I could see light on the other side, and movement. I was looking into a room. It looked like a living room, but it was stripped bare. No furniture, just piles of insulation and drywall stacked in the corners. And in the center of the room, sitting on a wooden stool, facing the wall, facing me, was Mr. Calloway. He wasn't fixing a shelf. He was sitting there, motionless, with a pair of heavy-duty headphones on, and he was holding a stethoscope against the wall. He was listening. I stumbled back, tripping over a pair of shoes. I made a loud thud. On the other side of the wall, Calloway's head snapped up. He looked directly at the cluster of holes, directly at me. He smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a predator's grin, revealing yellowed, rotting teeth. He stood up slowly, never breaking eye contact with the wall, and began walking toward the holes. I scrambled out of the closet, slamming the door shut. Panic took over. I grabbed my keys and my phone. I needed to get out. I needed the police. As I fumbled with the lock on my front door, I heard a sound that made my blood freeze. Click. The sound of a key turning. My front door lock turned. From the outside. I stared at the knob as it began to rotate. I realized then the duplex was owned by a private landlord. Calloway had lived here for 20 years. He probably had copies of every key.
I threw my body weight against the door just as it opened. Calloway was there, stronger than he looked, shoving his way in. He held a power drill in one hand and a roll of duct tape in the other. "You're loud," he whispered, his breath smelling of decay. "Too loud." I screamed and kicked him in the knee. His leg buckled with a sickening crunch. He howled, dropping the drill. The spinning bit tore into the carpet. I didn't wait. I shoved past him, sprinting out onto the porch and down the driveway. I didn't stop running until I reached the gas station 3 blocks away. I locked myself in the bathroom and called 911, sobbing hysterically. When the police arrived, Calloway was gone. His side of the duplex was empty, but what they found inside his apartment haunts me to this day. There was no furniture except for that stool, but the walls were a honeycomb. He had installed a system of pipes and funnels against the shared wall to amplify sound. He had recordings, hundreds of cassette tapes labeled with dates and times. Some were labeled sleeping, some were labeled shower, some were labeled with names of tenants I had never met. And behind a false panel in his closet, they found a crawl space, a narrow tunnel he had dug out between the walls. It ran the entire length of the house. The police found a sleeping bag in that crawl space. It was positioned directly behind where my headbed had been. He hadn't just been drilling holes. He had been sleeping next to me, separated only by a layer of drywall and his own twisted obsession. They never caught Mr. Calloway. The landlord claimed he had no family, no next of kin. He just vanished into the night. I moved out the next day. I live in a top-floor apartment now, in a high-rise made of concrete and steel. I don't have shared walls anymore, but every night before I go to sleep, I take a glass, press it against the concrete, and I listen, just to make sure no one is listening back. You know that saying, good fences make good neighbors? It's a lie. Fences don't do anything when the horror shares a wall with you. When the only thing separating your sleeping body from a monster is 4 inches of drywall and some insulation. I moved into the duplex on 4th Street in late October. It was a steal. Hardwood floors, high ceilings, and rent that was about $300 under market value. The landlord, a nervous guy named Peterson, told me the previous tenant left in a hurry. "Family emergency," he said. his eyes darting around the empty living room like he was expecting something to jump out of the corners. I didn't care. I was 24, broke, and desperate. The other half of the duplex was occupied by Arthur Gantry. That's what the mailbox said, Gantry. Sounds almost noble, doesn't it? He was about 70, skin like parchment paper that had been crumpled up and smoothed out too many times. He always wore these thick wool cardigans, even when the heating was blasting. When I introduced myself, he just stared at my neck. Not my eyes, my neck. He smiled, and his teeth were gray. "Fresh blood," he whispered. Then he laughed like it was a joke. I laughed too. I wish I hadn't. The first month was quiet, too quiet. I never heard him walk. I never heard a TV, just silence. Until the smell started. It began as a faint, earthy scent, like wet soil. Then it soured. By December, my bedroom smelled like a butcher shop that had lost power for a week. I bought candles, I bought industrial air fresheners. Nothing worked. It was heavy. It felt greasy in the air, coating the back of my throat. Then came the sounds. It was 3:03 a.m. I know the time because I was staring at the clock, trying not to vomit from the stench. Scritch, scritch, thump, right behind my head. It sounded like something trying to dig its way out of the wall, not in. I banged on the wall. "Hey, keep it down," I yelled. The scratching stopped immediately. Then a voice, muffled, distorted by the insulation, but audible. A voice that sounded wet. "Help me." I froze. My blood turned to ice. "Hello?" I called. Nothing. Then from Gantry's side, music, opera. Verdi, I think, blasting at maximum volume. It shook the floorboards. It drowned out everything. I called the cops. They came, knocked on his door. He answered in his pajamas, looking confused and frail. He told them he was hard of hearing and just wanted to listen to his records. The cops looked at me like I was the asshole bullying a senior citizen. They left. As soon as the cruiser pulled away, the music stopped and the scratching started again. This went on for 6 months. I started losing my hair from the stress. I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I slept on the couch with a knife under my... I started tracking Gantry. He never took out trash. Never. In 6 months, I never saw him bring a single bag to the curb, but he brought things in. Large, heavy suitcases, always at night, always struggling with the weight. One Tuesday, I stayed home sick. I saw Gantry leave in his old Buick. I knew I had maybe an hour. I didn't go into his house. I wasn't that stupid. I went to the shared wall in my bedroom. There was a soft spot in the plaster, right where the smell was strongest. I took a hammer. I didn't think. I just swung. The drywall crumbled like chalk. It was wet, soaked through. I pulled away a chunk of insulation. It was black with mold, or so I thought. I shined my flashlight into the cavity between the studs. It wasn't empty. It was packed, stuffed, not with insulation, with clothes, old, dirt-stained clothes, and wrapped inside them, organic matter. I saw a hand, not a skeleton, a hand, gray, desiccated, preserved like jerky, and eyes. Glass jars stacked between the studs, filled with cloudy liquid, looking back at me. Then I heard the front door open. Not my door, his. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat seized. I heard his footsteps, not the shuffling of an old man anymore. Heavy, fast bootfalls. He knew. He could probably smell the fresh air hitting his trophy case. I ran. I didn't grab my wallet. I didn't grab my shoes. I ran out the back door, hopped the fence, and sprinted until my lungs burned. I called the police from a gas station 3 miles away. They found 12 people in the walls of that duplex. 12. He had been thinning them out, preserving them, using them as insulation. The police said the "help me" I heard wasn't a ghost. It was faulty plumbing, vibrating the pipes, sounding like a human voice. But I know what I heard. Gantry? He was gone when they got there. The Buick was found abandoned near the state line. They never caught him. Sometimes, when I'm in my new apartment and the silence gets too heavy, I check the walls. I tap on them, and I pray to God I don't hear a tap back. People pay millions for a view. We did. My wife, Sarah, and I poured our life savings into a modern architectural marvel in the middle of nowhere. Glass walls, that was the selling point. Bring the outside in, the brochure said. The problem is, when you bring the outside in, you can't keep the terror out. At night, a glass house is just a lit stage, and the darkness is the audience. The property next to ours was technically a farm, but nothing grew there except weeds and rust. The farmhouse was a mile away, barely visible, but the owner, he was always close. We first noticed him 3 days after moving in. We were having coffee on the deck. Sarah pointed to the tree line, about 400 yards out. "Is that a statue?" she asked. I grabbed the binoculars. It was a man, standing rigid, arms at his sides, wearing a brown suit that looked 3 sizes too big. He wasn't looking at the scenery. He was looking directly at us. I waved. He didn't flinch. He didn't blink. He stood there for 6 hours. We laughed it off at first, the quirky local, but every morning he was closer, 10 yards, 20 yards. By the second week, he was standing at the edge of our lawn, right where the manicured grass met his wild weeds. He would arrive at dawn and stand until dusk. I went out to confront him. I marched right up to the property line. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to sound tough. He smelled like copper and ammonia. His skin was waxy, poreless almost. He didn't look at me. He looked through me, at the house, at Sarah, who was watching from the kitchen. "The glass is thin." His voice sounded like grinding stones. "Very thin. Stay off my property," I warned. He smiled. "It was too wide. I am on my land. You are the one in the fishbowl." That night, we put up curtains, sheets, blankets, anything to cover the glass. We felt exposed. The police came out, shrugged, and said, "He's not trespassing. Being creepy isn't a crime." Things escalated. We started finding things on the porch. Dead birds arranged in a circle, a doll that looked like Sarah, its eyes burned out with cigarettes. Then the photos. I found a Polaroid taped to the windshield of my car. It was a photo of me sleeping, taken from inside the bedroom. We packed immediately. We were leaving that night, but a storm rolled in, a massive localized cell that knocked out the grid. The house went pitch black. The electronic gates jammed shut. We were trapped. We sat in the living room with a flashlight, clutching each other. The rain hammered against the glass walls. Then lightning flashed. He was there, pressed against the glass. His face flattened against the pane, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. I screamed. Sarah screamed. The lightning faded, plunging us back into darkness. When the next bolt hit, he was gone. "Check the doors," I yelled. I ran to the back slider, locked. I ran to the front, locked. Then I heard it, a soft, wet footstep on the hardwood floor behind me. Inside. He was inside. I shined the light into the kitchen. He was standing by the island. He wasn't wearing the brown suit anymore. He was naked, covered in mud, holding a pair of shears. "The glass broke," he whispered. We ran upstairs to the master bath, the only room with a lock and no windows. We barricaded the door. We heard him destroying the house, smashing the furniture, tearing the paintings. He threw himself against the bathroom door, howling like an animal. "Let me see! Let me see!" We were in there for 7 hours. When the sun came up, the battering stopped. The police arrived at 8 a.m. The house was destroyed. But the scariest part? The police found a sleeping bag in the crawl space under the house, and food wrappers and jars of urine. He hadn't just broken in that night. He'd been living under our floorboards since the day we moved in. The man in the field, that was just to distract us while he burrowed up from below. We never went back. The bank foreclosed. If you see a listing for a glass house in the valley, cheap, keep scrolling. Suburbs are designed to feel safe. The lawns are flat, the streets are wide, the lights are bright. But you never look down. You never think about what's happening 10 feet below your slippers. I lived on Elm Ridge for 5 years. My neighbor, Elias, was an engineer or a miner. No one really knew. He was a frantic little man, always covered in gray dust, eyes bloodshot behind thick goggles. He spent every waking moment in his basement. The noise began in April, a drill, zzz, zzz, constant, rhythmic. It wasn't a hand drill. It sounded industrial, like he was boring through bedrock. I complained to the HOA. They sent a letter. Elias ignored it. The vibration got so bad that pictures fell off my walls. My coffee would ripple in the mug like that scene in Jurassic Park. One evening, my dog, Buster, started digging in the backyard. Frantic digging, whimpering. I went out to stop him, and I saw it. The ground was sagging. A depression in the lawn, perfectly circular, right near Elias's yard. I stepped closer, and the ground gave way. I didn't just fall a few feet. I slid. It was a chute. Mud and grass filled my mouth. I tumbled down into the dark, landing hard on packed earth. I broke my wrist instantly. The pain was blinding. I fumbled for my phone, flashlight on. I wasn't in a hole. I was in a hallway, a reinforced tunnel, shored up with stolen street signs and 2x4s. It smelled of ozone and rot. "Hello?" I screamed. My voice echoed endlessly. I started walking. I had to find a way out. The tunnel split. Left went toward Elias's house. Right went under my house. I went right. I felt sick. He had been digging under me while I slept. The tunnel widened into a room directly beneath my living room. I looked up and saw the underside of my own floorboards. I could see the piping of my toilet. And there, in the center of this dirt room, was a chair. A single chair positioned to look up at the gaps in my floor, and a notepad. I read the notepad. Timestamps. Subject sleeping, 11 p.m. Subject arguing on the phone, 9:30 a.m. Subject dropped keys. He wasn't renovating, he was monitoring. But it got worse. I followed the tunnel further. It didn't stop at my house. It went to the Millers, to the Johnsons, a web, a spider web of tunnels connecting the whole neighborhood. Then I heard the machine, the drilling. It was getting louder, and I heard chanting. I turned a corner and saw light, a massive cavern excavated by hand. Elias was there. He wasn't alone. There were things. Mannequins? No, people, covered in plaster, standing like statues in the walls. Elias saw me. He didn't look surprised. He looked disappointed. "You're early," he said. He raised a nail gun. I ran. I scrambled back through the dark, adrenaline numbing my broken wrist. I heard the thwip-thwip of nails hitting the timber supports around me. I found the chute. I fell down. I couldn't climb it. It was too steep. I had to go to his house. I ran toward his basement entrance. I burst up through a trap door hidden under a rug in his den. I smashed through his back door and collapsed on the lawn, screaming for help. The police SWAT team had to map the tunnels with robots. They stretched for 3 miles. They found cameras wired into people's vents. They found a nursery under the Johnsons' house. But the Johnsons didn't have a baby. Elias collapsed the main tunnel on himself before they could take him. They never dug him out. They just filled the holes with concrete. But sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I swear I can still feel the vibration. The drill, deeper this time. He's not dead. He's just going deeper.